Okay. Good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be here with you, enjoy and be inspired by your commitment to Dharma practices in the sincerest way that I can imagine, think of, and at the same time have the opportunity of sharing some of my understandings and misunderstandings also. uh, and be and then create the opportunity, create the occasion to be corrected, to be pointed at, and thus help each other in growing together. So we are in the journey together. Somebody has to play the role of a driver or some, right? Not everyone can just sit and have no driver at all, right? So just I happen to be the driver today, and we could switch on different occasions. So that's how I look at this. And but more importantly, we are here in this journey together and trying our best in figuring out how best to move forward, even if that be inch by inch, but definitely move forward. If we take one step back, make sure we take 2 steps forward. So yes. Uh-huh. Okay, yes. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So so that's what we have to make sure. And that's the only way by which we could make use of our occasion, make the best of our occasion with all of our wonderful potential. So that's what we are here together for. Yes, so this time I think this is the 3rd sequel. It has got to be the final one now. Somewhere it has to end, right? So that's how I'm also planning to kind of wind it up for a while. So you will see several of the old slides as well as new ones put together. So for those who are attending this for the first time, what I meant is we had met the past 2 years. This is the 3rd time on this topic of Madhyamaka, struggling with the topic of Madhyamaka through metaphors. And so this time I was thinking of winding it up, at least for now, in terms of sharing and discussing, but it can't stop, right? It has to be an inner journey, ongoing inner journey to then grow and then evolve to a certain point. Then one wouldn't then necessarily have to deliberately make effort. It would be just, to use neuroscientific terms, hardwired into who we are. Can never be lost, right? Then that's all. Until then, we have to make sure. So yeah, that's the reason why you will find several of the old slides as well as new ones, and I have lined it up in the spirit of the 3 aspects of the 3 principal aspects of the path. I personally use that in my daily practice, intertwine the entire, I blend all of my practice into that, and I find it very, very helpful and very grounding to the reality as well as to uplifting the spirit in alignment with the spiritual potential that we seem to have. So, right on the very first slide, the opening title slide, I say, an attempt to capture and convey the journey and intricacies and experiences of cultivating the profound Madhyamaka view through metaphors. And most of these metaphors, most of them, I think, are already there in the original scriptures. Something that's already there. It's not made up, but rather it's already there. Except I notice it. It may not be the case everywhere, but at least I notice it. When I was going through my training, my teachers kind of treated the metaphors lightly, and kind of they would move over to the main crust, main meanings. That's usually the tendency of the Tibetans. They always go for the best one. Like everybody would say, "Oh, we are Madhyamikas." Nobody would say, "I'm Chittamatra," even. Or I'm Vaibhashika. Irrespective of what their understanding is or not, they would say, "Oh, we are Madhyamikas." And then, when it comes to philosophical perspective, when it comes to the actual practice, all of the highest yoga, tantra. Yeah, it's good to recognize what's the best, what's the highest, what's the best. But at the same time, one has to kind of come to reality in what really speaks and what matches you, right? Yeah, so that's the attempt there. So during my times of training at the monasteries, I would always think, oh, here's a metaphor there. I wish the master could dwell more on the metaphor and then expand it from there. Or maybe the master is making sure that every available time is really geared and used in the substance, and not lost in the metaphors, but in the substance. Maybe that was the point. But I kept going back to, I wish they had dwelt more on metaphor, and that has been building up. And then when I came to Emory, and the Emory Buddhist religion department asked me to make a presentation on Madhyamaka, I said, yes, now I have the opportunity. I don't have to be the whiner, right? Against how others are doing, but I have the opportunity. Why not give it a try? And I made it a try, and then this is how, and the rest is history. History is still continuing in the third sequel. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Yes, we have to first understand why we need this understanding. Why Madhyamaka? Where does it fit? How is it related to the reality of our existence, of the questions of suffering and pain, joy and happiness, and how to kind of grow strongly from that basis, and then kind of bring these understandings to bear on the practical existential question of how to build on our prospects of joy and happiness, and so based on that, I start from ground zero, our own base. We have to first recognize, is this a samsara or not? Otherwise, we can't move forward. If you don't see any problem, anything wrong with the status quo, why care to do any changes, right? So we have to see whether I'm in samsara or not. We have to first see. How about you? Are you in samsara? What about you? No. Oh, everything's fine. So colorful. I want to stay here forever. Then there's no need. One could just keep on with the status quo. Although the status quo itself is not static, it is not fixed. The status quo itself means bringing all of those right into the pole, changing. Changing, in most of our cases, inescapably changing for the worse every minute. And then no guarantee, no insurance. We think that we have insurance for everything. No, one fundamental thing we don't have any insurance for, unless we build some insurance for what to come next. There's no company up there selling insurance for the next life. Just as we found ourselves with no insurance when we were born. Right? And that is not a trivial thing. That's something we have to bear with through the whole life. And whatever insurances here and there we gather up, they just pay for only little. Even the insurance companies themselves are not insured enough. Yeah, so that ground reality has to be figured out. So that's what I meant. Trappings of samsara. By the way, we have to really understand the concept of samsara. Usually the common take is samsara means environment, external world. No, that's not. No, Buddhas can be here in this external world. These do not affect them the way they do to us. And that means basically the effect is happening because of who we are, not as where we are in terms of external reality, external world. So samsara is not out there, it is in us. So that we need to recognize. Put in a nutshell, in the Buddhist scriptures understandings, it says, basically samsara. The term samsara in Tibetan means korwa. Kor has a connotation of cycle. Cycle, recycle, keep on cycling in a sickening way, with no guarantee of necessarily going up, almost more guarantee of going down, and that too with great speed, with no effort. And in the meantime, so many bumps. So in the scripture, it's clearly mentioned, samsara, although the term can be extended to include the external world and the internal world, but the main connotation, the main import of the term samsara is cyclic existence. So that is cyclic existence of the individual, cyclic existence of which the driving force are afflictions and the actions, activities or actions, deeds influenced by them, informed by them. The two of them are the driving force of this helpless yet ongoing cyclic condition of being, not just being born and die with no sense of control over it, and with no room for any choice in where and how we want to be born. But along with that, there's so many of the built-in unpleasant conditions of that. And in a way, we all of us are in a relative kind of a temporary vantage point, temporary point of relief, relative relief that that gives us the fortune or the leisure to at least heave a sigh of relief, from gross suffering, and get to contemplate on our condition. It's not necessarily the case with all other forms of existence. So that's the reason why it makes all the sense of taking this opportunity and really contemplating it, knowing for what it is, and doing something about it while we have the opportunity, while we are on board in a ship, Why not be mindful that the purpose of that is to cross the ocean, not just spend the whole time that one has in decorating the ship until it sinks, until it disintegrates. Then where would we look for another boat? It's not that easy coming. It has to be earned. Somehow, luckily, we have earned this boat that we have. Each one is like a strong, stable boat that could be used in cruising through the ocean of samsara. Well, that's the reason why we need to recognize what is wrong with this situation. Which is not to say that it is totally wrong. Not that there is nothing whatsoever that can be of use or whatever, but basically it is all rooted in conditions that cannot be relied on. So that's what we need to figure out. So this image is really very telling. Very telling. It shows the samsara. Any relative conditions within it, be that relative temporary relief, like relief and temporary pleasant condition, like that of beings in the God realms, or in the samsara, or in the human realms, or even in worse other conditions or whatnot. Basically, it is bound by the dictates of afflictions and actions induced by it. And the only way, just as we know through our systems understanding, these days systems understanding, systemic knowledge is emphasized greatly, and it's used in so many different spheres of life, particularly into the corporate worlds, in understanding how the system works. And if we want that system to continue, how to promote that. If we want to get out of that, where lies the point that we can break through. So likewise, it's the same case here. The conditions within the samsara, one thing, for those who are new to Buddhist concept, one way of looking at this is seeing the whole thing, seeing the whole system as being contained in oneself, and the ups and downs that we go through, that we have the potential for, to be seen as being reflected in the relative different conditions in different situations. So it's like seeing the whole six. In English, people keep calling 6 realms. It may be okay with English, but if one were to really translate it back into into Tibetan, Sanskrit, whatnot, I have some difficulty in saying 6 realms. We don't speak of 6 realms. We speak of only 3 realms, and within them, the categories of sentient beings are then spoken of as 6 categories. In English, realms, in a way, we could say, oh, in our own small realm, you could say like that. But if we have difficulty translating it back into Tibetan, then what do we call them? Because we should be calling 6 categories of sentient beings, or 6 types of sentient beings within 3 realms of existence. So, irrespective of that, one could see oneself moving forth and back within the 3 realms, conditions typical of the 3 realms, and also switching back and forth into the conditions of the so-called 6 types of broad types of sentient beings. So one way of looking at this is as a graphic representation of the conditions that one, as one sentient being, can go through. So it's not seeing God realms, hungry ghost realms, animal realms as being outside of us, but seeing the conditions that we go through that we are led through the process of our afflictions and actions. And this is something that I'm not making up. In the Lamrim text itself, it makes a brief passing reference to this, that one way of looking at this is, if one has difficulty seeing this as being real outside there, one could see that as a representation of the conditions that one can go through, depending on what afflictions happens to be dominant and taking over our being. Say if jealousy is taking over, then we can see, unless and until we take charge in correcting it, in addressing it, if we let ourselves be swayed by it, then the conditions that ensue from that would be very similar to what the conditions in a hungry ghost, in demigods is explained. Likewise, if we give in to greed, right? Greed. By the way, among the 6 categories of sentient beings, the affliction that is as associated with the humans is not that clearly spelled out. The sufferings typical of humans would be birth, death, illness, like that. But this is something very common. But anyway, we as humans are more attuned to or more associated with grasping, clinging. Partly it has to do with our capacity, our faculty, our wonderful faculty for imagination, of planning ahead, of looking back. We're so sophisticated. Unless until we use this properly, it could just serve as another extra, very sophisticated, inextricable source of more suffering for us. So clinging. So we may cling to ideas, concepts, images, and find ourselves hard to kind of set ourselves free from that, and that drags on, and then sufferings happen. So likewise, sometimes when arrogance takes over, or we would have then tendencies of looking down upon others take over us, and then the conditions ensuing from that, be that in the form of our mental impulses or in the form of physical actions, whatnot, would be very typical to what is explained in the scriptures to be the case with the celestial beings, kind of completely carried away by the affluence, the everything is right kind of attitude, so that one loses contact with the actual reality until and realize and until it is too late, and one sees nothing but one's outright downfall. By which time all of the resources would have been exhausted, and nothing would be stored there in terms of a safe, in terms of a safe that one could rely on. So anyway, so that's very, very helpful way of looking at it. But at the same time, among the different types of sentient beings, animals we see, right? We cannot deny that there's something other than us there, and then see how much we can accept, how much we can be comfortable with. Although one can do some experiments also. Yeah, there are experiments that even very ordinary monks have done in terms of how in the world there can be other beings that is spoken of in the scriptures and whatnot. So If we find time, then we'll share those. Anyway, so something that we have to be very clear about is the individual sufferings. There's conditions that are very particular to oneself, very particular, that cannot be shared by others, even the closest relatives and whatnot. And there has to be some reason for that. Why in the world I go through what I do, and the way I go through is in such a way that it cannot be accessed fully by others. How excruciating it is, how deep-rooted it is, how entangled it seems like, how uphill the task it is to kind of undo the ties, etc. And then the common sufferings that we find universal in our kind of existence. Physical pains, the very fact that we have the physical body itself is the basis for potential pains, right? So, which is not to say that that's totally 100% bad and 100% kind of unpleasant, whatnot, of no use, whatever. But that's to bring a balanced perspective to what our body is, or what it is liable to, so that we would have a balanced take of it, and thus that will inform us intelligently in terms of how much to value it, how much to rely on it, and etc. Kind of come up with a balanced middle way kind of attitude towards it in maintaining it, yet at the same time not overdoing that, not totally neglecting it, but at the same time lowering down on total indulgence in it, etc., etc. But the more important thing, the more practical, as well as the more troubling thing about our condition is our capacities of mental, of creating and being in mental problems, in mental sufferings. We are our status quo. If we are to go the way we are conditioned, although it may vary with individuals, but mostly we could relate to how easily succumbing we are to our negative impulses, how our perspectives kind of collaborate with them, and how the faculties of our imagination, foresight, hindsight, looking at things, how all those could conspire against us unless and until we take charge. And the pains coming from that could be very, very excruciating. And I'm telling this from my own experiences. I'm fully confident in telling about what mental sufferings can do. And I think we can all relate to that, right? How all of a sudden we can call it up and be completely immersed in it. But one thing very, very helpful in my condition, at least fortunately, it would have been very difficult if I had gone through this much earlier with no inkling of how in the world is there possibility of untangling it, or how in the world it is you who is contributing to it, or whatnot. If I didn't have that side, then I have been a mess. But luckily, I had that slight indications, not experiences, but slight indications of scriptures, all pointing that, oh, this is what you do, this is what is happening. Kind of then wondering, oh, maybe this is an opportunity for me to test them. good that I'm going through this. It is very real in me. Why not test them? Testing this has been really revealing that it is tied to so many strands. There's so many connections there that you pull, and when you pull them, you actually see the difference. You actually feel the difference. Like, kind of some tensions from this side release, some tensions from this side release. That's where you can really see the Dharma coming to light. Dharma coming to life. Coming to light, coming to life. Wow. And then seeing that being the possibility, yet at the same time seeing that being your own making, makes you really worry and be concerned about others. Really, how would they? I mean, this is something that you can't reach out to and totally make a difference, except from an outside saying this is how you can do, and kind of sounding easy, which sometimes can put them off, saying, oh, talking easy. No, this is not how it feels when you're in it, right? So you really feel concerned how the solution is very close to you, but very far away and difficult to be seen. But this is very real. So samsara, the quality of samsara, the condition of samsara has to basically come down to this aspect of our being. The others are peripheral, physical conditions, physical body, physical conditions, environment, situations outside. But deep down, the troubling thing about samsara will be not in terms of not in terms of where you are born, how you are born, at what time you are born, but in terms of what inner conditions you are born into. So it's the inner condition that will decide whether you are in samsara or not, or whether you are making the progress of coming out of it or not. So that's where Dharma comes real. All the other things could be left at bay for now, but the more urgent, pertinent, but at the same time very urgent, is to deal with know the mental conditions and then be able to deal with that. So these are the conditions we are in, and which is not to exclude other joys and pleasures, etc. But unless and until we take charge of our condition properly, even those so-called joys and pleasures could also be contributing to bigger suffering to entail. But then among them, the main crucial, urgent condition is the mental condition, mental agonies. By the way, I have learned one more thing about agonies. Agony, yeah. It is, from a Buddhist perspective, the condition of clinging and grasping. Those are what you call physical expressions of agony, or sometimes they are even associated with agony, which is something that the Bodhisattva Aryas don't have, but even the Shravaka Aryas do not escape for the time being. And that's what is giving. That's what is keeping the condition in samsara, or condition in samsara, or condition under samsaric situation continue, which is to say that that's what keeps on going, the mechanism of being born into samsara, being born into samsaric condition, not being born in samsara as a realm of existence, but being born into that condition by being of it, not just merely in it, but of it. And that's how the question of agony is associated with. Anyway, let me be mindful in coming back to not be driven into the details too much, but let me say, set right, this is the condition. So we have to agree whether this is really what I'm in or not. That's what we have to come to understand. We have to agree, well, yeah, do we have the potential and situation of being in individual sufferings that are very unique to ourselves, that unless and until we have a hang of them and deal with them, we would have to be undergoing this. Likewise, there are common sufferings that we all share and that we all find ourselves together in. And then with the physical body that we have, although maybe as we proceed on, then we can make distinctions, or maybe through questions it will come. But for now, I'll just say, as if just having the body itself is the reason why we have the physical pains. For now, I will say this, although it's not necessary. It is not necessary. Wow! It is not necessary. But it will depend on the strength of the mind. Anyway, mental agonies, of course, without the strength of the mind, we can be dragged into excruciating, ongoing, recoming, revisiting, again and again, mental agonies. So if at all we need to make efforts, we should be making efforts in not merely kind of temporarily dealing with them, living the prospect of them coming again, but rather kind of really search for the root of them and then see if we can root them out. So the agonies are, physical pains, agonies are like the surface expressions of them, but deep down there are more crucial reasons for them. So from a Buddhist perspective, we see they are associated, they are tied to the afflictions. Although when I say afflictions, I do not necessarily only confine them to the realm of emotions. Afflictions could be seen in the form of emotions as well as in the form of cognitions. So they can be afflicted. Usually I want to call these dissonant mental states. Dissonant mental states, be there in the form of affective emotional form or in the form of cognitive form. So afflicted, both in perspective, outlook, cognitive sense, that we need to look inside and be able to recognize them for what they are and deal with them accordingly, which means either mitigating them, addressing them, or improving them, developing them. And likewise, emotions. Emotions could be afflicted or they could be unafflicted ones. So we need to find them out. But mainly from a Buddhist perspective, the pains, agonies, they are all rooted in the afflictions. And the afflictions in turn are rooted in what would be a unique position of the Buddhists, or that the Buddha are rooted in what we call innate mental tendencies. Innate mental tendencies. Innate, not in the sense that we cannot separate ourselves from them, but innate in the sense that we have been so habituated in it that now they almost become part of us without having to be, what do you call, consciously cultivated. And so deep down, these conditions need to be recognized within ourselves and how they are contributing to the unpleasant conditions of our being, of our existence, how the ravages of them could even continue in times to come, if there is. I'll be very frank. Maybe I'll wait. Maybe not on the very first day in the first session. I will be very frank. Because this may be the only chance I can be frank with you and with myself. Who knows? After a while, we'll be gone. In the scriptures, it says, it's like coming together is very similar to a wind blowing, bringing leaves together. Almost they are talking to each other. Oh, how has been? All of a sudden, it's blown away, they're gone, far away, almost leaving no prospect of ever meeting. If they do, they may not be the same group. It could be just one, two of that old group, but not the same. And then again, it keeps on going, right? So who knows? These opportunities do not come quite often, right? Why not be frank while you have the opportunity? Well, by the way, when I say being frank, I'm talking of praying with myself. I'm praying with myself primarily. I'm reminded every time you call this teaching, I always avoid calling my session here as teaching. You may have noticed it in the emails when it's a teaching. I say, oh, our session, our sharing. If at all you insist on something, call it something beginning with T. Then I would say, teasing. My teasing sessions. Teasing who? Myself in the first place, and maybe others in the passing. So yeah, please look at those prank talks as being frank with myself, okay? And then if it's being frank with others, that's good. Otherwise, I will definitely do that. I cannot miss it because I have some slides that will touch on it. Although at that time I may or may not point to them as what they are, but I will just go with the flow. So this is the condition. And this stays for the whole life. Ups and downs, right? Ups and downs, ups and downs. Sometimes it could be just down spiral. But at least it could seem like ongoing for some time. But then ups and downs. And on the whole, our whole condition kind of gives in to the pressures, to the ravages, to the dictates of impermanence, and then keeps on going. And then, right? So that's our condition. Now the question is whether this is just for this time, just this one and only time, or is it going to happen again? And if so, can we guarantee what that condition would be? Can we predict what that condition would be? Could it go worse? Could it go better? And on its own, what I'm saying is on its own. By the way, the important question for us to ask is, how in the world I'm born? I'm here. Right? If I'm born this time here, why can't I come back? If it has happened once, why can't it come twice? Right? We may not necessarily have to go continuously, but why not twice? Why not thrice? Are we prepared for that? Do we have insurance for that? Karmic insurance. Although we have to again deal with the question of karma. So this is the extreme of bondage. Extreme, not in the sense that this is the worst it can get in the bondage. Not in that sense. Oh, this is nothing compared to what we could go. Here, I'm using the term extreme bondage in the sense of, in the spirit of what we speak of, two extremes to avoid. One extreme is bondage. Bondage, bondage to the dictates of afflictions and the actions influenced by them. The other extreme, not in the philosophical point of view, right? In this extreme, when we are speaking of these two extremes, we are speaking of extremes in the sense of conditions of our being, right? Conditions of our being, of our existence. One condition of our being is what we are, what we find ourselves in. That is a condition which is primarily dictated by the afflictions and their root misperceptions, and then the actions, the force of actions, the force of habits driven, informed by these afflictions. So that's called bondage, which is considered one extreme of existing, of which we are in one kind of a bondage, which is not the extreme, the worst it can get. It can go worse. So which means being born as humans, being born as animals, being born as other beings are all representations of that bondage. And that bondage itself is considered an extreme. Not that the condition that we are right now in is the worst within the bondage. So this has to be understood. So extreme bondage in that sense. So basically it is saying, irrespective of the ups and downs in the meantime, the very condition that deep down we can still get off the hook of the afflictions and the dissonant mental conditions with their root in the afflictions, in the misperceptions intact. That is considered bondage, and that could take different forms, of which we are in one form, at least from a Buddhist perspective, right? But as I said, the worst thing is the mental condition, our susceptibility to the dictates, our susceptibility to the dictates, to the directions, forces of our negative impulses within us. So let's move on to the next one. Yes. Now here I show our bondage in operation. This is taken straight from the three principles, except this is a different translation. And you will find this in the section of generating bodhicitta. I have adapted it to this level, to this first level of seeing our condition. Swept by the currents of the four powerful rivers, tied by the strong bonds of karma, so hard to escape, ensnared by the iron net of self-grasping, engulfed in a dark mist of ignorance, tormented without end by three kinds of suffering, through endless cycles of cyclic samsaric existence. This is my condition in samsara. So, with this opportunity that we have in really making a difference, it would be worth reflecting on our condition rather than kind of let it just carry on the way it has with no, and then spend our time in trivial, superficial fixes, whatnot, but not really get to the actual condition of it, that would be total misuse of the opportunity. So that's why we need to kind of look and see whether this is the condition that we are in. If I were to do a better job and more sophisticated job in presenting it in the pictures or not, it would have to be what do you call, so many different layers of them, right? First would be 4 strong currents of water that come from 4 different directions, and you are in the middle of it, carried away. As if that were not enough, you had your limbs bound. As if that is not enough, not only you are being carried away by the 4 strong rivers, currents of rivers, and not only your limbs, hands and legs are bound, but you are in an iron cage, locked, of which you don't have the key. And even if you have the key, no possibility of opening it with your limbs bound. And then, as if there's not enough, there's no light, it is total darkness. And then you keep being bumped against rocks and shores and sides by these rivers. And there is no end, it keeps on going and going. Can we relate to this situation? Let me tell you. The 4 currents of powerful rivers, there is a mention, although people count them differently. I associate it with 4 kinds of afflictions, which are termed as rivers in the Abhidhamma. So the mention here, or the association here with the river, I take it literally from the Abhidhamma, where there is a mention of different categories of afflictions, of which one category composed of 4 afflictions are termed as water currents, or chuo. Chuo means strong water currents. One is desire, another is our clinging to views. We are strange sentient beings. We may have attachment to things, material, possessions, whatnot, but deep down we may even surprise ourselves finding that we are more attached, more clinging to our ideas, to my views, to my opinions, to how I think. Kind of wisdom to have even more protective, clinging towards them. Another is called sipa. Sipa is bhavana, I think, and that is, I have a hard time pinpointing what that actually is, apart from seeing sipa as either the condition into the samsara or the rife causes leading to it by way of karma. Not just mere dormant karma, but ripened karma ready to ripen. So that's likened to one river. So we have, and then the 4th one is Mamba, ignorance. Ignorance is also associated. Although ignorance here could mean more. By the way, it will be good to mention, when we speak of ignorance in 2 terms. There is a very interesting way of calling it in the scriptures. It says, one ignorance, meparatave ignorance, yoparatave ignorance. One ignorance that sees things to be not exist, things that doesn't see things existing when they are existing. And the other is, right? Did I get it right? One involves not seeing, another involves seeing. Except in both cases, it is wrong. So both are called ignorant. Ignorant not in the sense that it's not just blank, not seeing, but either not seeing what is already there or misseeing what is already there, which is also missing the point. So we speak of these two ignorances. It is very essential. You may have already been introduced to this. You may already know about this, but I felt it very important to mention because later on it will be connected with what we speak. So, not seeing in the sense not seeing, not believing, not seeing, and not just staying at that, but kind of abject denial of things that could be there. And then the other one is extreme of its own, kind of being so obstinate, insistent, obstinate in claiming something to be there which is not there. So one comes in the light of, so the scriptures very interesting to point out. Yeparatawe mongba, meparatawe mongba. Ignorance which involves seeing something. Ignorance which involves not seeing something. Or rather, to put it more strongly, ignorance that insists on the existence of something which is not there. Ignorance which insists on the non-existence of something which is there. So one of the rivers that we are talking of in this, when it's called ignorance, it could be both of them. By the way, of the two of them, well, the gravity of the two of them can vary with what stage of involvement, in what stage of spiritual involvement one may be in, what is the urgent, crucial question to deal with. Depending on that, one of these ignorances could be the immediate thing to deal with. And anyone can have varying amounts of both of these. More so, the ignorance that pertains to seeing, pertains to insisting on the non-existence of something that is there. It could be much more difficult to deal with. We'll get to this in our fourth sequel. I already see a fourth sequel to this. Well, okay. So that means our usual thoughts, perceptions, behaviors, expressions are not something that we are necessarily capable of doing with full conscious, mindful choice, but rather we are driven by the forces of these river-like impulses that are built strongly within us. That's what it's saying. But that's what it's mentioning here. Either how you see, how you deal, how you look at things, how you feel, unless we take charge of our emotions, it could be the force of attachment driving us and dictating us and coloring it. Or it could be our strong forces of ripening karma that could be influencing it. Or it could be strong attachment of identification with particular view that is kind of dictating it, that's kind of swaying it. Or it could be any one of those deep-seated ignorances of not knowing or insisting on something being not the case when it could be. And that is driving us and dictating and shaping our thoughts and our perceptions, our conditions. So that's the condition. So that's what it is being talked about. So we have to see whether that's the condition. From the moment we rise up and until we go to bed, when we deal with situations and speak with people, handle things, whatnot, how capable we are in steering clear of the dictates of these forces or not. How, in the case of someone, we have someone who have no inkling of how the internal mechanism works, how that could be taking place in a much, much stronger degree, with great risk of really bumping into and great risk of inviting more problems. So that's what it is. So I think we can, to a certain extent, we may be fortunate in really kind of having been drawn our attention inward and see those happening, and thus be able to at least see that's happening. And the mere sight of that itself could have the effect of mitigating the influence, say, rule of them over us. And then with some techniques, tools in dealing with them, we could be succeeding in getting away, at least temporarily, from them. But on the whole, that's the condition we have to be aware of. And then, not just the present conditions are dictating things, so much of our inbuilt tendencies, so much of our inbuilt habituations. That's how I look at karma. By the way, karma is a very dynamic concept. It's not something static, set. Even the past actions, habits can be undone, be that positive or negative. So it has to be seen as very much part of the actual working of causes and conditions in the world. Except karma involves, in the causal stage, karma involves volition, intention, emotions, whatnot. And likewise, in its resultant situation, it involves suffering, pain, joy, experience, something consciousness-driven conditions there. Except for that component, the way it works is very similar to how external worlds work, where everything, if we just succeed, could be accounted for a cause leading to it. So that's how not only the immediate feelings that we have are to be looked at and taken into account in dealing with our situations, but also in the background, the build-up tendencies, habits, impulses, predispositions or dispositions, which even in our daily life, we speak of dispositions as a condition of kind of habit built over time. And from a Buddhist perspective, we're speaking of habits built not just in one life, but several lifetimes. But at the very least, we can see how somehow we can see how from the time we are born, we seem to have those varying individual, unique tendencies. No matter how we may differ in accounting for them, from a neuroscientist point of view, they speak of tabula rasa, a blank sheet that we are, and with training, everything is put into it, written onto it. It may or may not be the case, because it may or may not be the case. But anyway, what we are saying is that over time we develop these habits, impulses within us. And so not only the immediate situations are to be looked at, but also be aware of some tendencies that you cannot account for right here and now, being kind of a built-in dispositions within oneself. And those dispositions can be very inhibiting, limiting, constraining, and thus the karmic conditions, although as much as they are made to sound, they are still amenable to change. even past karmas, be that negative, positive, they can be changed, they can be altered through one's actions here and now. But at the same time, when they are not touched, they could have an impact on our way of thinking, on our directions that we may be taking. And then these dispositions can be accounted for our ways of relating to things, our ways of behaving in situations when we are totally taken by surprise, how some tendencies within us, people differ in how they deal with situations in such conditions. But then the condition with which they deal with this should be something within them in the form of built-up habits or dispositions, whatnot. And that's a very personal and constraining and limiting. So that's how karma is like a bond that is hard to escape unless we make efforts. In this regard, what will be helpful is, usually I do that when some situation already happens, and I try to look at as when something has already happened and it's already matured and has already been activated, then I tend to look at that as karma and accept that, because failing to accept that can only aggravate the situation and make the pain even bigger. Until then, I always do not leave it to chance. I make effort with the understanding that even if it were to be karma for it to go this way or not, it is still amenable to change, which is what the scriptures say. So karma is not a fixed fate kind of a thing. Good actions, positive actions that we engage in, of which we have built habits for, could be undone later on before their results ripen. Likewise, is the same case with negative actions also. So I don't see anything mysterious about karma, except when it comes to mysterious, except when it comes to really kind of practically accounting for such all the nitty-gritty details of what led to this, or what we did something, what not. That would be beyond our comprehension. But in terms of its being there, it is also, it goes without question, because everything would have to be accountable, irrespective of how sophisticated it may or may not be. There can be anything, not a single thing that happens without cause. What do you think? Can something happen without cause? We have expressions like, oh, this is happening by chance. Oh, those are used in our own conventional sense, not by chance to mean that it has no cause at all. Maybe a cause that we cannot lay our hands on, but no, it's pure physics, right? It's pure physics, except it is internal physics. Now we should be moving slowly inching into speaking of internal physics. I mean, physical world is as much related to causes and forces leading to it, not leaving it to any kind of a mysterious force. Likewise, from the Buddhist perspective, it is totally acceptable, and even the scriptures itself mention how negative actions of which the karmas we have engaged in before they ripen can be dealt with. Likewise, our actions under the influence of strong afflictions can get back to our past habits or tendencies, karmas, or positivities that they could suffer from that before they can arrive. So that's how. But it requires special effort in affecting, altering the past karma. Until then, it's like a bond that we cannot escape from. So that's how it is part of our condition. And now another thing is, ensnared by the iron net of self-grasping, we will unlock, unpack what self-grasping means, because grasping is used all over in so many different ways in the Buddhist context. So it has to be unpacked. It has to be really clarified. So we have to go beyond the vocabularies and try to kind of unpack the actual core meaning of them. So here, self-grasping, within that there can be so many varying degrees of self-grasping. Let me put it like this. Basically, it is a tendency of clinging or believing in some notion, be that some notion about oneself as a person, or be that at a higher level, at a more graver, profound level, clinging to a notion of how it could be anything, self, others, whatever, is how anything, it could be self, others, how the mode of existence of things are, kind of completely misconstruing the mode of existence or the identity of anything, self or others. So self could be used both in a personal sense or in a sense of identity that is applicable to everything. So there is this need of really unpacking it and relating to it at different levels. On the whole, they can all go for self-grasping, but nonetheless, within that, we can find so many different levels of them, different layers of them. All of them very constricting and having a very strong, strong impact on our negative, very strong influence over our negative emotions and wrong perceptions. So, and for a while, we can't even, we would have difficulty even seeing that that's the case with us, or that there's anything wrong with that. So that's how the hang of it on us is so strong that it's likened to an iron net. And then the all over it is darkness. It's saying that not only with regard to oneself, as a person, one has this strong misconception in terms of its identity, but when it extends beyond self, just to about everything, anything, one has that blanket misperception in terms of their way of existence, how they exist. And thus, it is almost like a blanket ignorance is kind of covering everything in terms of our perception, in terms of our way of seeing things. So that is not that easy to first accept and identify, and then later on, even if we have a slight clue of what it is, it would be even more difficult to kind of expose it, to see through it, and then particularly see its link to the afflictions that we have within us. And then, yes, because of these conditions, then we go through these unending experiences of the three kinds of sufferings. One is the apparent. By the way, the term suffering, it may not be the exact, most preferred term to use here for dukkha. We speak from a Buddhist point of view, we speak of dukkha, for which it is usually translated as suffering, in three senses. One is, I usually call dukkha as painfulness, the condition of painfulness that we are in. One is the painfulness of apparent experienced pain that we can all relate to. Even animals that do not can show a sign of not liking them. But then another is the painfulness of change. The painfulness of pain is the surface apparent experience of pain that we all identify as pain, unpleasant, whatnot. But then the painfulness of change is not that apparent as painful. It's not that apparent as anything wrong with it. Rather, we tend to see that as something pleasant. Of course, it may be fleetingly, temporarily pleasant. Of course, that is not to be denied. That, but it is built in with its own seed of destruction, with its own potential to disintegrate into an apparent pain. So the condition of limitation, of not just limit in how much it can present in the form of temporary joy and whatnot, but limited in that it can lead to an apparent pain. And then the third one is the painfulness of this pervasive condition of being tied to the dictates of afflictions and the actions induced by them. So, and that's kind of tormented without end, in that there is no specific order in how they come, and also there is no unless one makes effort, there's no chance in sight of their coming to a stop. So that's the condition that we are in. And if this were to be just one time that we are in, then we can say, okay, I can, what is the expression? I can tide it over, I can endure it, and then be done. All right? But of course, even within such a perspective also, whatever efforts, whatever understandings we have, insights we have in terms of what is actually happening, how it is happening, whatnot, can really come handy in kind of relieving ourselves of the unnecessary sufferings that it can entail, and kind of drag us into even more prospects of suffering, whatnot. So that's the condition. We have to see if that's what we find ourselves in. Of course, as I said earlier, this is not to paint a picture that this is all there is, none of the other things that we associate with life. But at the same time, they're all kind of tied and rooted in these basic conditions of how what we saw as pleasurable, whatnot. Of course, they are what they are capable of, but they are not that deserving of overinvestment that we put in. Because if we do that, that will only bring more suffering. Usually, I make this example: like if you have something to lean against, you can enjoy it and lean against it. If you know how strong it is, you'll be able to lean just accordingly and enjoy from that. But if you don't know how reliable it is, then you kind of put all your, all into it. Then there's, pardon? Yeah, all of your weight into it. Then there's not just chance, there's almost a surety that one could have a big crash. And we keep on doing that to other things, we keep on having the crash. So that's what is being attempted to present here. Okay, so let's move to the next one. Yes. So that's why the determination to be free. That's why by dwelling on this, then we can hope to develop a personally generated, not dictated by others, but personally generated sense of the need to do something, and also see the possibility of doing something. I call this determination to be free. Usually the Tibetan term for this is ngejung. And in the English world, it is usually translated as renunciation. And this is so misleading. People think like, oh, what Buddhism calls right away is renounce everything. It is not. And sometimes people think that, oh, what Buddhism calls for is renouncing your world, renouncing your life, renouncing your household life, or renouncing whatever situation you are in. You know? People tend to think ngejung in terms of renunciation in that context. At the same time, people use the term renunciant to monks and nuns, right? So they lump these together. They collate this together. Renunciant. Oh, renunciation? Is that what it means? That's not it. Being renunciant has to be rooted in this determination to be free first. First, seeing that the causes of suffering is in the internal mechanism within us, and develop a strong stance of opposition, caution against that. So renouncing or determination free in this context is coming up with a strong awareness that the problems, the sufferings lie their root in those afflictions, and if possible see even further into their root misperceptions. And developing this sense that yes, these are to be dealt with. One has to break free from this. So that's ngejung, that's determination to be free. And that's very basic for the Buddhist perspective. Unless and until one sees the problems to be rooted in this, there's just about nothing you can be doing that could be called Buddhist. Sometimes, by claiming that you are Buddhist, you could be doing totally un-Buddhistically. I've come across some people expressing their experience in their families, where the families are still Catholic, whatnot, and they are one of them may have become Buddhist. So, from their own experiences, somebody has shared, saying, "Oh, I create problem when I'm Buddhist. And they don't like when I'm Buddhist, but they really like and enjoy when I'm Buddha." When you are behaving in a spirit, in a way, you are really pointing finger at the afflictions within you and dealing with them. Even they appreciate, even they enjoy. But when we keep the afflictions intact, then this level can be even more problematic. One has one more thing to cling to be associated with, to be very protective about. I mean, it's like keeping the whole dirt intact and bringing one more thing to add to it. That's because one loses sight of how one has to get free from what Buddhism is speaking to begin the path with this determination to be free. Whatever you are going to call it, determination to be free, aspiration to be free, to break free from the clutches, shackles, or afflictions, that is crucial. No matter how successful one is or not in actually doing it, recognizing it and knowing that that's what one has to do. And then to be able to do it in a much more facilitated situation with the less obstacles, possible obstacles, whatnot, then one may make the determination to be renunciate. On top of that determination to be free. If not, then I'm still reminded. I really like quoting William James in this regard. He says, people think they're thinking while they are merely rearranging their prejudices. I really like it. He really gets it. People think they're thinking while they are merely rearranging their prejudices. While they are keeping intact their prejudices, their dirts within, and smearing other things, new things, right? So that means getting more dirt. Whereas Buddhism, to begin with, is getting rid of the internal dirt by first recognizing those to be dirts, those to be the culprits, those to be the actual culprits. So this is so important. One of the reasons why I began the way this way is this. I really needed to point out, because I really needed to point out this distinction for myself. I mean, others may have been really clear about it, but I myself have been mixing it to the point that my own translation of the three principal aspects uses the term renunciation there. I said, oh, unless one takes the renunciation in that spirit. Otherwise, it is really problematic. That's not what it is suggesting. So irrespective of whether one is a lay person or not, being Buddhist, in being recognizing where the dirt lies, where the root of the suffering lies, and then at the very least develop a sense of caution against it, sense of opposition against it, and make the determination that I have to break free from it, break free from the dictates of it, break free from the clutches of it, and then work, whatever one does, build on that. If we can break free, if we can recognize the source of our problems in these afflictions, which is not to say exactly, which is not to say that merely dealing with this will really resolve everything. No. What it will do is it will keep one from getting unnecessary sufferings from the way situations are. Yet at the same time, with that kind of awareness and efforts in dealing with this, one will be at a better place, better vantage place in dealing with the actual problems also, while not contributing to them. And be able to lay the blame exactly on where it should. Like one would not be jumping into being angry or hateful of a person, but at the same time taking a stand against his or her action, and be able to really deal with the situation in a balanced way. Because the situation needs to be taken care of. It is harming others, harming the person himself or herself, but at the same time, if that kind of awareness, the actions, is rooted in one's awareness, caution against the possibility of it being ruined further by one's giving in to these afflictions within oneself, then one would be in a much better place in dealing with it. So, not only this. Recently, I contribute to Eastern Horizon magazine in Malaysia, and I have seen Venerable Thupten Chodronla has been a frequent contributor to that. And recently I even saw, is it you? Yeah, right? Yeah, Venerable Thupten Nyima. Yes, I saw an article there. So there, I have been contribute one of the three contributors to a feature called Forum, and they asked six, seven same question to three different uh, monks or practitioners in Tibetan, Theravadan, and Chinese Buddhism. And those questions it seems like are questions that people ask, not what the editor thinks, or the editor has problem in understanding, but what people ask. One of the questions was, Buddhism speaks of renunciation, and renunciation is leaving household, leaving all the responsibilities, how worldly responsibilities, how in the world can we do it? Is Buddhism for us? Say, oh, definitely. Without this determination to be free, which is beginning with putting the blame on the afflictions and the wrong perceptions within us. There's no way we can really make a headway in our prospect of building inner peace, inner joy within us and then to others. So that's why I have cared to have a separate slide on this. Of course, it is flowing with the narration as well, but also care to kind of put the definition here. And ever-present, if possible. Note that we can start with ever-present. This is like a tall order. Tall order. I mean, at least it is setting kind of an ideal at where we can get, where should we get, if possible. But at least one has to work towards that. An aspiration for freedom from the captivity of afflictions. Aspiration to begin with. Based on a deep-seated disillusion with the lures of samsara. Again, lures of samsara means, right? The lures of samsaric forces. Again, in the form of clinging, grasping, greed, afflictions, all of that. This is very important. It's just like grounding our practice. Now it's getting real, right? It's not wishy-washy. Wishy-washy. But it's really getting real. And getting real to the actual problems within us, right? If we can really recognize them and deal with them in whatever ways we can really feel the difference. That's when we will begin to even feel free to fly, which means feel free to kind of mingle in the world, yet at the same time have this confidence. After all, I have the button. After all, I have the button to push, not others. And I have the choice to push it the way I like. Because after all, we are all CEOs. We are all CEOs. Did you know that? Chief Executive Officer of this corporation. And we have to assert that. So far we have not been. We have to assert that. You have to show ourselves, by doing it, by feeling it. And the way to do that is by seeing the buttons within. That will happen when we have this determination to be free, rooted in the recognition that yes, the fault lies in there. So yeah, with this good news that we are CEOs of this world of ours, of this great corporate world of ours, right?